I'm Jeff Provine, and I love a spooky story. I've been researching folklore and haunted sites for over a decade, and I believe, if you listen closely enough, there are great stories everywhere. Let's see what we can find while we're visiting haunts. All right, welcome to Norman, Oklahoma, which is birthplace of famous actor James Garner of Western Westernaires, and of course Doppler radar, and home of the National Weather Center. I'm Jeff Provine, and I came to Norman to go to the University of Oklahoma, which is where I first got intrigued by Oklahoma folklore. I heard stories of Professor Bogus still coming back to student performances despite having passed away, and a little boy roller skating on the third floor of the old hospital building. I've been doing ghost tours here since 2014, and although I really like the folklore, I've never been what they call a sensitive person. I don't interact with the spirits directly. Although we're gonna go check out the Moore-Lindsay House, where I was once kicked out by a ghost. I was attending an investigation by Valkyrie Paranormal, who, before I had gotten there, were having a really good, exciting night with lots of activity. But I came in a little bit late after a ghost tour, and everything died off. They were trying to get some communications going on the ghost radio, couldn't get a little word here or there, but finally had this whole sentence come out that said, "Cast out the writer." And being the writer, I of course said, "Thanks for everything, I'll see you later." And I found out later that after I had left, they had all kinds of more activity. Plenty of spirits that wanted to make themselves known, just they didn't want to be written about. So let's see what that was all about. Hello.
Hey Jeff, it's nice to see you again.
You too.
Welcome back.
Thank you, always a good time to visit.
Absolutely.
For those who haven't been here, tell us a little bit about the Moore-Lindsay House.
Yeah, so the Moore-Lindsay House was built in 1899, so about 10 years after the town of Norman was founded.
Okay.
It was built by a couple named William and Agnes Moore. But the Moores only lived here about 8 years. They did not keep the house, and they moved to Oklahoma City. But they kept the house in the family. They sold it to Mrs. Moore's niece and her family. That was Harry and Daisy Lindsay.
Okay, so we get Moore-Lindsay House.
Yes, that's where we get our name, because the Moores built it. The Lindsays were the primary residents. They lived here, owned the house all the way through, I believe, 1951.
Oh, wow.
Maybe 52, so somewhere around there.
Long
so a
time
long
in the
time,
family.
yeah. This was Norman's first wealthy neighborhood. So not as full a neighborhood as it is now, more like 1 or 2 houses per block.
Okay.
But this, Peters Avenue was known as Silk Stocking Row at the time. That was the nickname. It was Peters Avenue, but because that's where the people who could afford silk stockings lived. So I don't know that this was the first house in the neighborhood, but it was one of the early ones for sure. So, yeah.
Great. Well, with so many decades in the family, did they have anything they left behind?
We do have some family pieces that are here. Most of what we have in the house are things that the Historical Society has gathered over the years that are from the time period and typical of this area, but not original to the home. But we do have these 2 chairs here that belong to the family. They were embroidered by Mrs. Lindsay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I can't imagine having a lifestyle where you get to embroider your furniture, but she had a lot of time on her hands, didn't work, had servants to do her work around the house for her.
Wow.
So the only work I think she did on her own was the cooking, because she loved to cook and she had high standards. She didn't think anyone else could do it as well as she could. So she did all her own cooking for her family.
Very cool. What else would you like to show us?
Well, I'll point out the photo here is a photo of this room with the Lindsay's daughter Agnes in it.
Oh, wow.
And Agnes is a name we'll hear again later with our spooky stories. So I like to point her out. She spent a lot of time here. This was when the Moores owned the house. So she wasn't living here when she was this young. She only lived in the house for a few years before she got married and moved to Edmond.
Okay.
But she spent a huge amount of time here. She always brought her children back here to see their grandparents. Her grandchildren would come back and spend their summers here with their grandmother and their great-grandmother, Daisy Lindsay. And so Agnes is a big part of the family story, even if she wasn't living here in the house very long.
Wow,
So,
very idyllic.
yes.
Great. Well, speaking of kids, you said you had something to show us about keeping track of everybody's height.
Yeah, so let's go learn a little bit about Agnes's children and grandchildren.
Awesome. All right, so when I had come in, came into the parlor, I guess, that's where guests would be greeted, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So where are we now?
So now we're in, that was the formal parlor. We're in the informal parlor, or probably more casually called the back parlor.
Okay, so 2 parlors, not bad.
Yeah, so the front parlor was for guests, the back parlor was for the family. So this was really more where the family spent their time. They didn't use that front room unless it was with visitors. So this was probably much more lively of a room in general.
Yeah, especially with kids and grandkids coming to visit.
Absolutely. And then actually later on, probably in the 30s, Mrs. Lindsay made this her bedroom because she didn't want to do the stairs every day anymore. And I think what I'm about to show you probably dates from the time it was her bedroom. So in the window frame over here, if I pull back the curtain here, you can see these are the height markings of Agnes's children and grandchildren. They are mostly from the 30s and 40s when they were here visiting Daisy, and most of them are grandchildren, some of whom are still with us and giving input on the museum and talking to us, telling us stories about Agnes.
So with such a long history of family and energy going on, plus multiple people moving through the years, there would be a lot of potential for ghost stories, I would think.
There absolutely is. And also because so many of the items that we have in here have their own long history, but they've been donated. I think we get a lot of things, travelers or people attached to different items in the house that we don't really know much about because we know about who lived here. Sometimes, we get some mystery ghosts that are like, we just don't know who this is, but
wow. Cool. Can we see some of the items?
Absolutely. Let's head upstairs. That's where most of our activity is.
All right.
Right. Well, welcome up to our turret room.
Turret room.
Yes. So we're inside the round tower that you see on the front of the house, up on the 2nd floor. This is my favorite room in the house.
Lots of windows, plenty of light.
Absolutely. Yes. Like I said, my favorite room, and I suspect it's the favorite room of some of the spirits that we have here as well.
So you mentioned Agnes.
Yes, so we think that Agnes is still hanging around here. There's been some question as to why, since she didn't live here very much, but Agnes, from what I've been told, was very vain. And I think she may just be here listening to us talk about her and tell her family stories. Her home that she spent most of her adult life in has been torn down.
Okay.
So she's got a place here where she's still being thought of and talked about. So I think maybe that's the draw.
Oh wow, yeah. So come back and visit again.
Yes. We often have visitors come in who say they're sensitive to the spirit world and things, and they will often ask when we're on the 1st floor, what's at the top of the stairs? Who is at the top of the stairs? There's a lady up there watching us. And often we'll describe her as being fairly young, probably in her mid-20s, thin, very beautiful, which Agnes was. So it sounds very much like it is her still keeping an eye on things.
Yeah, and living her best afterlife.
Absolutely. Yeah. What better place to do it? It's a beautiful home. So.
Wow. So people sense her. Anything else she does?
If I'm up here after dark, she doesn't appreciate me being upstairs. Sometimes I'll be in the bedrooms. A lot of times at Christmas time, I'm here late decorating. And I will feel like someone has walked into the doorway and is standing there staring at me.
Oh, wow.
Just like, why are you here? And I'll look up and I'll say, okay, I'm gonna go home now. And I'll pack up and leave because I definitely get that impression that you're upstairs after dark. This is really inappropriate.
That's right, family only.
Yes. So it is not uncommon for me to get that feeling that I'm being told, this is not where you belong right now.
Wow. So you mentioned spirits with an S. What other stories do you have?
Well, we have, we think that Daisy is probably here as well. We've had a couple of paranormal groups come in and do investigations. We actually open them up to the public and do them as a fundraiser for the museum. But they are always active, and almost always do we hear from Agnes, occasionally from Daisy, and very often from one of what we think is one of Agnes's sons. It's definitely a young boy who likes to play games. One time I was telling a story of a visitor who said she was here in the parlor and felt a small hand on the back of her arm. And the little ghost radio piped up with a little child's voice that said, that was me. I said, oh, well, hi.
Yeah. Yeah, which not often you get an entire sentence like that.
It was definitely a little bit shocking.
Yeah. Well, at least he's not shy.
Yes.
So you mentioned that Agnes was very particular about the master bedroom. Maybe we can go check it out and
Absolutely.
see if she'll show up for us.
Let's go see how she feels about us being in her bedroom today.
All right, so this is the master bedroom.
Yes, so I usually call it the primary bedroom just because master didn't come around as a term until probably the 1920s.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah, after the time the house was built. So probably primary chamber, but I just can't get in the habit of chamber. So primary bedroom's close enough for me.
Sounds very clinical.
Right, but this would have been Mr. and Mrs. Moore's bedroom first, and then Harry and Daisy Lindsay's bedroom. I don't think it was ever actually Agnes's, although now I believe she thinks she's the lady of the house.
Yeah?
Because she definitely seems to have claimed this one at this point.
Yeah, certainly has seniority.
Yes, absolutely. And this dressing table in particular, she does not like it. Now, none of these things belong to her in life, but we have asked her through the, mediums and things, is this yours? And she very much says this is hers, and she does not like it to be touched. We had a REM pod set up here, one investigation, that if anybody came too close, it would go off until we backed away and apologized. At one point, we picked up the hairbrush and the REM pod went crazy. Just lights and sound and all kinds of I've never seen it do all the things at once before. So that was interesting. So she's protective of this area. We had to move everyone away from it so that she would stop being so offended that we were near her things.
Right, which just be polite.
Yes.
Wow. Well, thank you for your time. And if anybody wanted to come check out the house and see if they can visit Agnes, what would be a good way to find out more information?
Anybody can find us on our website at normanmuseum.org, or we're on Facebook and Instagram at Moore-Lindsay House.
While we're here in Norman, I did want to share a story from our ghost tour. So we talk about the Sooner Theater, which is the first ever talkie in the entire region. People would come in 1927 and see things like Steamboat Willie and blow their minds. People say that they hear audiences applauding or people crying or music playing when the entire auditorium's empty. But the most famous ghost is the one they call the White Lady. She's very beautiful and seen wearing this big white gown that always descending the eastern stairs. Some people say she's one of the starlets from the movie days, that golden age of Hollywood where the actors would travel around with the movie to get something signed while you go and see it. Other people say no, she's from the older days, back when it was the Planters Hotel. They say that she has those long sleeves and a high neck that you would recognize from the 1890s when what stood here was the first ever brick building in Norman. We don't know all of the details, but if you come on a ghost tour, you can find out more, some of the other ghosts that are in there and around town. Hey Jacob, thanks for taking the time to chat with us. I'm glad to catch you. Could you tell us a little bit about the shop?
Yeah, man. My name's Jacob Peregrine. Me and my wife opened the shop in 2018, so a little over 5 years ago. Kind of put all our favorite things in one place. So plants, flowers by the stem, vintage, new clothes, gifts, etc., etc. So
very cool.
Yeah, man. Norman's been good to us.
Sweet. Well, I hope it continues to.
Yeah.
Because you've got an awesome space.
Thanks, man.
Tell us about the building.
Absolutely, yeah. It was built in the early 1900s. It was originally a hat shop, so they were, spitting hats left and right. In the 20s, it became a post office, so it was technically one of the first post offices, to my knowledge, in Norman, Oklahoma. And that's where this awesome safe came from, so it's actually totally concreted into the building. And we've got a beautiful apartment upstairs that has original floors from the early 1900s and skylights, and it's really a special spot.
Yeah. And then with so much history and energy going around, I would imagine something's sticking around to make itself known.
Yeah, man, we've picked stuff up on the cameras, so that's where you've seen the most interesting stuff. We've got a video camera over here in the corner that's always running, so it's picking up any kind of movement. So late at night, every now and then, we'll get some orbs that are kind of moving through this space. Wow. A lot of times they seem to start in the safe area and kind of whip around and then end there again. So they always seem to end where they started, which is interesting.
Yeah, because if it's just dust flowing, it'll just flow.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's the main thing. Little things like, cards flying off the wall when there's no doors open or wind or anything. But That's about the most we felt. It feels like a friendly presence.
Yeah, just keeping an eye on the place.
Yeah, exactly.
Not bad. That does it for this episode of Visiting Haunts, where we've checked out some spooky stories here in Norman, or where I first got interested in Oklahoma folklore. That also wraps up our first season of Visiting Haunts completely. We've checked out some really cool stuff here in Oklahoma, but come on back for our next season for more stories in Oklahoma as well as in surrounding states, because you never know what you might find.
If you like Visiting Haunts, then become a member of Spill Venture to help support our next episode. As a member, you'll get early and ad-free access to content, as well as exclusive discounts and bonus goodies. Also, be sure to check out our store for all the spooky merch. Happy adventures!